Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Book Talk with Kara, and I'm delighted today to introduce you to my friend, TI Lowe, and we're going to talk about her brand new book, Indigo Isle, which I have loved so much. If you like Southern fiction, a little bit of women's fiction, romance, it's got all of that. And having been to Charleston, I really enjoyed jumping back to that location and just really being embroiled in this warm story, but that has real characters and just, I don't know, I was really swept away by it, TI. And I thought we could start by you introducing yourself quickly, and then we'll jump right into talking about the book.
Okay, well, I'm going to start by saying thank you for having me here. I'm just a Southern storyteller. I like to tell people. I like to tell stories, and I write how I speak. So it's just, to me, it's a conversation in my books. And I've been writing for the past 9 years now. Yeah, 9. It's hard to keep up with it, isn't it?
It is.
Especially since the pandemic. It's like you have pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and I can't keep my timeline straight anymore. So I guess it's okay with our author. We can kind of fudge those things, right? We can't remember right off the bat. But
it's about this long, about this many books.
Sort of, yeah. But I enjoy writing Southern fiction. It's all about, traditions and culture of the South, Low Country. And my latest book, Indigo Isle, is set in Charleston, South Carolina. And just as you said, you enjoyed visiting there. And it's probably about 2 hours down the road from me. And it's one of my favorite places to visit. It just has so much charm. And you can just walk down the streets in Charleston and a story will come to mind. And so that's where Indigo Isle, my latest, isn't it? That cover is gorgeous, I do believe. And
I love it.
The indigo dyed fabric. Yes.
It shows up so much better in living color than on my Kindle cover.
It's my Southern take on Prodigal Daughter meets Beauty and the Beast.
Yes. And I loved that because I picked up on it so quickly. I was like, oh my gosh, it definitely has that Beauty and the Beast feel. But then it also has so much more to it. So how did you take those two elements and say, I'm going to put them together and they're going to have this book baby?
Just by chance and luck, I guess. So the prodigal daughter or the prodigal son is like one of my favorite parables of in the Bible that Jesus shared. And I don't know about you, but as an author, when you're given a story, but you don't get all the pieces of it, you sort of start making up your own version of what could happen. And my thing that always intrigued me was the prodigal son, and then how it come about where the obedient son, how maybe they interacted after the fact, if they reconciled, if they just bashed it out and went at it. But I wanted to explore that in the sense of, the female dynamics of the family. So you got the mother, the prodigal daughter, and then you have the two obedient sisters. And so it was pretty fun to get to see how they would respond to the prodigal daughter coming back. And so all that reconciliation. And then Beauty and the Beast, I don't know about you, but that's my favorite fairy tale. And because the hero is flawed. I like a wounded hero, so to speak. And so my beast in Indigo Isle he's the monster of Indigo Isle. That's what the locals call him. He's a recluse out there. He's, his life experiences have scarred him. So he's pretty much just excluded himself away from the world. And Sunny, she's my leading lady of the book. She comes back and work brings her close to home. And so she ends up going out to explore this island, and she butts heads with the beast out there. So that's where it all came about.
But what I love is you've got these two characters, the hero and the heroine, and they're both wounded. They're both scarred by things that have happened. And yet she kind of keeps fighting and keeps pushing and keeps moving forward. And he's kind of frozen in time. And so it's this really interesting juxtaposition of we kind of have a choice because everybody's going to have a moment in time where something's going to happen to us and we get to choose what our response is going to be. Are we going to be like Sunny and just kind of keep pushing forward? Or are we going to choose to be like the monster, the beast, and just kind of get stuck and frozen? Because we all have scars. It's just a question of, his are very visible, but hers are also visible in how she is responding to people, but not physical. And so I thought, was that intentional, or was it something that as you were writing, you started to realize, oh, these characters both are having similar, I guess, responses to things or scars, but they're kind of different sides of the coin of how we respond to that.
I am a pantser. I don't plot out a story because I like to be able to let the story tell me how it's going to go as it goes along. And it was wild how the prodigal daughter story really it meshed with the beast story. And as you said, they both had things they were running from and things that they were hiding from. They had their scars of life, internally, externally. And it's amazing how that just happens sometimes, and how you're in the middle of writing, you're like, oh, so these two things go together. How'd that happen?
Exactly.
Do you plot or are you a pantser?
Normally I started as a plotter because my publishers required that. And then I became more of a pantser. And the book I'm writing right now, I'm definitely a plotter because I've got to write it really fast. And so I've got these very detailed outline, and it's going so fast because I've thought about everything that's happening. And I'm like, oh, I've forgotten how nice it is to have the really detailed outline. And so I'm kind of playing with maybe I need to go back to being more of a plotter because I can do either. I really can do either, but it really is kind of that function of when am I going to do the work? When am I going to do the discovery? Do I do it kind of sitting there beating my head against the wall before I start writing? Or do I do it beating my head against the wall, staring at my computer screen going, why won't the words come? Because I don't know, what's next or whatever. So when you say that you're a pantser, but you also had at least kind of these germs of an idea. How does that, you're like, okay, I'm going to have the prodigal daughter and I'm going to have the Beauty and the Beast. How do you go from that to this rich story?
Well, I loosely plot, but I give myself freedom. If it needs to change, it can change. I can't think of an example right off the bat, but definitely things changed as the story went along. So I give myself permission to detour and take different roads away from the outline. But you just have an idea of where it's coming from. I don't know about you, but I love this quote, and I don't know where it come from, but I probably misquote it a lot. But I don't write to be understood, I write to understand. And so there's always a topic or something that intrigues me that I want to know a little bit more about. And in this one, it dealt with, the whole prey and predator,
yes.
the instinct of either fight or flight or fight. But there's also a third one, and that's freeze. And Sunny, our leading lady of the story, she deals with freezing, and it looks a lot like permission, which it is not permission. And so there's a lot of Me Too ideas in there. I wanted to understand better, how a woman navigates that when she doesn't look like a victim, but she is a victim, and how she can find her voice and stand up against those that are assaulting her. So Sunny had
that was so powerful, because there is that, we always think it is fight or flight, but there is this element of some people do just freeze, and we don't talk about that. So then we do think, oh, well, that's consent, or they're okay with it. And that's not at all what's happening. And I thought you actually did a beautiful job of illustrating that in a way that wasn't, token. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to throw this out there, but it was actually very honoring to people who have that, but also helpful for people who don't, where we can go, oh, now I've kind of experienced that through fiction to be more understanding, or even to be able to see it and go, that's not okay. She's not actually okay with that. Maybe I need to intervene. But when I've written a book like that, where it deals with those really hard issues, it's hard not to get like down in it and not get depressed. Or, I mean, you have to do a certain amount of research so that you do understand this is what it's like to be stuck in this case, that freeze kind of perspective. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to read about it and then that's it. You have to kind of put yourself in that. So how did you navigate that? Because that's not easy, at least in my experience. I have to be very intentional about other things I'm doing in my life, so I don't kind of go down that rabbit hole and get stuck.
You really can if you don't be careful. There's heavy research days when it comes to these topics, like in Indigo Isle, I've covered sexual assault. Under the Magnolias was mental health. And there were some really dark days in there.
Yeah.
You're dealing with people they're suicidal, they're going through, some of the darkest times of their life. I have a friend who says, all right, today's the day to step, because I'll tell her where I am. And I think it's important to have someone to talk to about, a confidant. And she says, today's the day you need to step back from that story, that part of the story, and maybe focus on something else. And a way that I handle hard times in life is I crack jokes. I'm not saying I'm good at it, but and I probably do it the wrong times, but that I'm not a crier, I don't express that, emotion in public. So instead of crying, I'll crack a crazy joke. So I always try to put a little bit of humor, some comic relief throughout the story. I feel like it's necessary because even the readers, you got to give them a break from it too, but I need a break from the heavy. So you might find something silly in my books out of the, middle of it.
Well, V was a great example of that. She's this character who you're just like, oh my gosh, what crazy thing is she going to do next? And yet she was this foil, but she was also a reflection of Sunny at the same time. So she wasn't just like, oh, I'm just comic relief. She was actually adding depth. So it was beautifully done, again, with her character as well. So you started writing out of a hard place, because your journey started when you were actually walking your mom through a really difficult journey. And how did you turn to writing? Because I think everybody, when they're in those hard spaces, we all have different ways that we process. Some of us shut down, some of us will turn to art. You turned to writing. How did you come to that? I mean, why wasn't it something else? Why was writing the place that you went when you were walking your mom through cancer?
You know how people say, when did you realize you were a writer? And honestly, I feel like we're born with it. I felt like I was born a writer. I just suppressed it. I didn't explore it. I was a closet writer. I didn't let anybody know that I was doing it. But at the time my mom was diagnosed with cancer, it just worked out where the good Lord let me take care of her. I was her caregiver. So we'd be sitting in chemo lab, and I feel like I can share this now. My sister just passed in November, but I've never really shared much that it was her that we were discussing, because it was her story to tell, but she's not here any longer, and I feel like I should tell her story. But she was in an abusive relationship, and me and Mama were sitting in chemo lab, and I said, I don't understand why she won't get out of it. And she says, Tanya, until you walk in those shoes of an abused woman, you'll never understand it. So I'm like, well, that weren't good enough for me. I wanted to understand. And so I just went and I started researching and watching testimonials of women who had been in an abusive relationship and how they had to get out. And then there were stories that I found where women didn't get out. And so I just started writing Lulu's Cafe. It was not to share it with anyone else. It was just me. As you said, it was my outlet to understand something. And and then probably the most rewarding part of that book is I was able to give my main character a happy ending, because so many women don't get that happy ending. And so that's where it came from. And then I finished it, and Mama said, all right, you have to share it. You need to share it. And I remember she told her hospice nurse that she introduced me as her daughter, who was an author. And so she made it hard for me to not pursue it. And so it was a promise I made to her. She passed away September of 2013. And then I self-published Lulu's Cafe 2014 in January, but as a promise to her. And I mean, I honestly, it was like, it was checked off the list. I said I'd do it, and I did it. And then just from there, just a whole bevy of stories have just come from that. And I've published Indigo Isle will be number 19 since then. So
that's awesome.
well, thank you.
Yeah, and it's and that's, I mean, the types of books you're writing where they're dealing with real life and they're dealing with the hard issues, those are hard to write, because you have to crawl in, and you're doing the research, and you're exploring these hard topics, and you're doing it in a way that's actually honoring the people who have lived that experience. Because sometimes we can just kind of sugarcoat it and be like, oh, this is what I think it's like. Mm-hmm. And that's not helpful to anybody. And so I know for me, when I write stories that go in those places, it's really important to find people who either work with those populations or have come out the other side, so that they can just check and make sure, did all my research, did I get it right? Did I miss anything? Because I do want it to honor people who that is their experience. It's not mine.
Yeah, I totally, every time I take on a hard topic like that, my goal is to respect those that are in that situation. I never want it to come off as being judgmental. I never want it, because we know Jesus was he was not judgmental. He loved everybody, and he reached out to anyone that needed, everybody that needed him. And it weren't just picking and choosing, it was for everyone. And so my idea is, if someone has gone through this experience that I wrote about, that, they're like, yeah, this is my story. And then if you've not, then, I hope it'll give people pause, like, maybe I do need to respond in a different way. I need to be more understanding. So yeah, you have to, I look at, you got to look at it from I do as a writer. I want to look at it from all points of views, and definitely respect whatever topic I take on, because I'm not an authority on any of it, but I feel like you definitely need to do your research.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what sets apart people who are playing at writing stories and those who are writing the story. And that's a really important distinction. Are you really digging into it and getting into that space? Or are you just like, oh, I'm just going to go with what I know, and it'll be good enough, and it's fine, I'm not hurting anyone? Because you can actually really hurt people if you're not focused on getting it right. I mean, I've even had to, and I went on childhood sexual abuse. I intentionally wrote the prologue in a way that it would be a trigger warning for people, so that they could know right away, this is not the book for me. Even though everything was going to be way in the background, I didn't want to even take that risk. And so that's something that I think everybody's going to pick a different way, but it's important just to honor people in that space. So you are from the South, and your books are set in the South. If you were going to write books set anywhere else, where would it be? Where would you pick?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I know you. I have such a distinct voice. I think if you read my books, that there's gonna be ain't and y'all. And it was funny. My Swedish publisher, they did an interview, and I was talking with one of them over there, and I said, well, in the South we have our own language. How on earth did you translate my book in that different language? And I said, so tell me how you say y'all. And so she looked through the book, and she came to a section that had y'all in it, and it sounded like a word that long just for a little y'all word. But I don't know that I could pull it off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a very Southern dialected feel. And that's what I love because I grew up in Georgia and then lived in Virginia for a while. I was like, I'm immersed. This is real. And so when we hopped on, I was not surprised at all that I'm like, yep, you've got the Southern thing down because you've grown up with it and it is you. And that comes through versus people who, if you're from Washington State and you're trying to write it, you may not get it right just by watching Sweet Home Alabama and things like that.
And readers are smart. They'll call you out on it. You'll read a review and they say, well, they didn't get the dialect right, or they didn't know the area. And so someone asked me one time if I would ever consider writing nonfiction. I was like, no. Said, you have to know your facts for that. With fiction, you can just make it all up. So no, you stay in your lane, right?
That's right. Yep. And that's where even when I write historical, I write one time period because the amount of research is daunting. I mean, people who pick different time periods all the time, like, you go, not the thing I want to do at all.
See, I love to read historical, but I'm too nervous about ever trying to write it.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. I love reading all kinds of genres. So what's your favorite genre to read when you're like just trying to relax and get in, kind of fall into a good book? What do you love to read?
It may be surprising. I love murder mysteries.
Ooh, do you have a favorite author?
No, not. I mean, I love to. I tell people and books are similar. You need to give them all a try. I mean, it might not be for you, but you may miss out on something wonderful by not giving it a try. So right now I'm reading Stephen King's Billy Summers, and it's about an assassin. I know that sounds crazy, but yeah, I read all over the place. And I'm going to tell you one of my favorite, and it felt very Southern to me, was The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hill by Robert Dugatti.
Yeah.
I was, oh man, that was so good. Did you ever hear a book that people say, if I could read it again for the first time, that would be it? It was so good.
I have a couple of his books on my Kindle to read, I have bookshelves everywhere in my house, but the Kindle, I'm like, it's daunting how many books are on here. But that book of his, I keep hearing about. I'm going to have to just get it on audiobook or something so I can actually dig in. Because I'm always looking for new authors to try. And he spoke at ACFW, and I learned a lot from him. But I still haven't read any of his books, so I need to change that. Absolutely.
Start with that.
I'm like,
so good.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that. Although I haven't read Stephen King. Colleen Coble loves all his stuff, and I'm like, I just don't do horror.
Well, see, that's my daughter said, have you heard about Billy Summers? I'm like, I don't do horror. And she's like, no, it's not horror. It's like suspense thriller. And I've started reading it and I can't put it down. It's really good.
Today, and I love suspense. I love a good mystery thriller. I love them set all across time.
Yes.
But I don't do YA that much, and I don't do sci-fi. It gets too outside. It's sci-fi fantasy. If it's not set in a world I can imagine, I'm too much of the attorney then. I'm like, I don't get it. My left brain can't figure it out, I guess, or something.
Yeah.
I guess that's just where that part comes out. But the purple is my right brain coming out to play. The inability to imagine a world I haven't been to is, I guess, the left brain going, yep, nope, can't do it.
Look, so. You're both though. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I have to tell y'all, if you have not read TI Lowe's books, you really should start with Indigo Isle. And I think really any of them you would enjoy. But I really couldn't put down Indigo Isle the moment I started reading it. And I was in the middle of writing this book, y'all, that I have to write like in 2 weeks. So to find time to read it was actually kind of a feat of will, but it was so good and really just swept me into an amazing story. So highly recommend it. And it was just fun to have you on today. So thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks so much.